Joel, or sorry, Mr. Case, Joel Case, could I turn to you, please? You're a young guy. I don't know if you're late teens or early 20s, but you're a young guy. You're a post-Troubles generation. And you've indicated to us today that, that basically, if it comes to it, violence would have to be used if things were really bad. But whilst that might be an ideological or a theological question, whatever, I want to turn to you about your actual activity. So have you ever taken steps to step in and to stop any of your young associates being involved in violence?
Of course. Most recently on Good Friday, I was arrested at the demonstrations at Sandy Row. And I mean, I've been very open about the fact that while I was there, I was there to try and dissuade, it was a 13-year-old and his brother from engaging in the violence. So, I think some people may have opinions or perceptions of what they think I might believe. But, my actions, back up the sort of thing that I maintain that violence is an absolute last resort. And up until you're pushed to that point, I think we should be doing everything to discourage our young people from potentially ruin their lives with criminal records. And then also the obvious, a riot is not a safe place to be for anyone, let alone a 13-year-old child.
You indicated you were arrested. Were you charged subsequently to that arrest, or were those charges dropped?
I was released without charge, and then I was notified by my solicitor, I think just about a week ago, that they were not pursuing the case any further.
Right. So you were at the cold face in a riot, and your actions, you had a fork in the road. You could have engaged in that riot, but you chose to intervene to try and pull two 13-year-olds away from it. Is that right?
Of course. Well, a 13 and a 14-year-old, but yes, 100%. I think that I understand that these young people are frustrated and they don't know the details of the Northern Ireland Protocol. They couldn't quote you certain paragraphs or anything, but they know that fundamentally something is wrong. They know that whenever they're sort of out, even at the Shankill at Lanark Way, and they're watching as sort of the nationalist youths on the other side of the fence, the police aren't responding to them. The police aren't arriving to sort of control their side of the fence, but they are arriving on our side of the fence. Young people see on the ground that there's an injustice and there's a sort of imbalance in how nationalists are treated and unionists are treated. And sort of the violent outbursts that we've seen across the country is a reflection on that. And it's a sort of way for these young people to vent their anger and vent their frustrations. And while I disagree with the methods of doing so, I understand their frustrations.
I don't want to go down the area of how these issues are policed, because that's probably a completely different inquiry. But just to set the scene, if you like, you saying these young people may not know which article or which part of the treaty they're opposed to. They know and feel and sense that something is wrong. Do you get a sense from speaking to young people and teenagers your own age and in your own community, do you think that both the UK and the Irish government have sent a signal out that violence pays and that violence will be rewarded? Do you get a sense of that?
I think definitely. I went to a state school, and we had talks about things like this. We had talks about borders and Brexit and that kind of thing. And anytime the idea of a border between Northern Ireland and the Republic was brought up, it was met with an absolute no. This cannot happen. This is an absolute fundamental no way. We can't do it. The Good Friday Agreement is this document that sets out that this can't happen. But now whenever we're being presented with the Northern Ireland Protocol, which essentially does the same thing, it just puts the line between Northern Ireland and Great Britain rather than between Northern Ireland and the Republic. We're being told that maybe it's not okay, but there's sort of ways that we can work it and we can tweak it to make it work. It's not met with that same level of absolutely no, this violates the law. And I think that's unfair, and young people know and understand and see that it's unfair.
And Tommy, would you have political aspirations? Would you want to be engaged in politics, or do you now feel that politics has failed and is failing? And do you see a way out that politics could get back to working for you?
I think, I'm a big fan of the political process, and I've done everything that I can to encourage, my peers and younger, to try and get involved with the political process. I think that it definitely can work, and I'd be certainly eager to see what your new party leader Edwin Poots has to sort of offer unionism, because I think what we really need is a leader that young people can get excited about. It's all well and good, these leaders coming out and sort of condemning violence and saying, you're going about it the wrong way. But what we really need is a leader to come out and say, look, we understand what you're frustrated with. Here is what we want to achieve, and here is how we're all going to work together to achieve it, peacefully, politically, without having to resort to crimes.
Right. Mr. Campbell, could I ask you something? You alluded in your answers, I know there was a lot of them you had to give, but in one of your answers to Ms. Hannah, you alluded to the position that the SDLP had taken on the Irish border, that's the Irish land border, and you wish that it had been as strong on the sea border. Now, Ms. Hannah wrote about this at length in an article on Business Insider, and she'd indicated at one point that if 60% of people do not want the border on the island of Ireland, and you're told tough SH1T, we are putting you inside a hard border, you then can't expect people to just choke that down and get on with their lives. And she went on to say, you cannot imagine that people would take without civil disobedience at the very minimum. Do you equate that with a threat to instability if the land border had been reinforced in any way on either the British or Irish side in Northern Ireland?
Well, I would regret those comments, just as we have publicly vilified the previous Irish government and its Taoiseach and Foreign Minister for actually going to Brussels and threatening the resumption of a bombing campaign along the border if there was a hard border on this island. I welcome Ms. Hannah's comments today in coming in and saying that equally the hard border between Northern Ireland and the rest of our own country is equally unacceptable. Therefore, I hope that she and others would appreciate the deep sense of hurt and anger that there is right across the Unionist community. I've said publicly I've never witnessed such anger since 1985 when the Anglo-Irish Agreement was imposed. And I thought, particularly with the 25 years I've spent actually trying to build peace and build relationships in this island, that the days of imposition had gone. So we have had a lot of focus today on elements of our letters and public comments that in some ways could be perceived as threats. We are not in the business of issuing threats, but we are in the business of issuing warnings. And what wasn't read into our letters was the appeal 3 months ago to use the window of opportunity, particularly created by the current pandemic restrictions, to actually have that dialogue. It has been a source of immense frustration to us, for example, that Michel Barnier repeatedly declined to meet us. We have asked Vice President Šefčovič to meet with us. We haven't had even the courtesy of an acknowledgement. We met Lord Frost last week, who had a very frank exchange with us and finished up by saying, look, the European Commission needs to hear what I'm hearing. And he hopefully will undertake to facilitate such a meeting. But our whole remit is about dialogue, encouraging dialogue and cooperation rather than confrontation. Joel Keyes has put it extremely well. You know, I was his age when the Anglo-Irish Agreement was signed. I was arrested for protesting against the Anglo-Irish Agreement. It came to nothing for me, and I was able, through my family, to go into the Ulster Unionist Party and spend the past 30 years in active politics. And I hope he takes that same route. But the problem is there is a whole generation that doesn't have the facility to go into politics. And that's the challenge for all our leaders right across the community, to offer the political solution. But politics has to be seen to work.
Yes, and do you think that the equivalence on violence, whether it's comments of, which we've heard this morning, that if things come to the very end, we'll go to violence, or violence could be used, or we'll have a situation where we'll use civil disobedience at a very minimum, and tough doodah if you don't like it, or things which Mr. Leo Varadkar has said in the past about highlighting problems to do with the old security border. Do you think that equivalence on violence, which shows kind of this is a spiral downwards on both sides of the community, that zero sum, do you think that zero sum was completely either A, disingenuous, or do you think that it shows that there is a real concern within this society that we're always on the edge, that we could just creep over into violence at some point?
I think we definitely could creep over into violence. I have described this as probably the most dangerous situation for many years. But I do hope common sense will prevail. I do get the sense that particularly the Irish government misrepresented the potential impact of an Irish Sea border on the Unionist community in Northern Ireland. I really appeal to them to join the effort to rectify this protocol. It may require, for example, Simon Coveney to fall on his sword if he was the chief architect of that mischief. But is the peace process not much more important than the Northern Ireland Protocol?
I think most people would agree with that. Can I ask you about the issue then to do about the protocol, how it undermines Northern Ireland? And you've alluded to that in your comments. So I have in my hand an email from a constituent who placed an order for a delivery from a shop in England. And he got back, sorry, delivery is not available to this address. This may be because items in your basket cannot be shipped to your selected country. And of course, this was to a UK, a GB company, where he had normally purchased goods here in Northern Ireland for his own business. Do you think that it's that practical outworking of the protocol right at the cold face, where people can't actually buy goods in British shops and ship them to their homes in the same way that people in Liverpool would do it, that they can't do it in Limavady or Lurgan? Do you think that that's what's really getting up people's goat?
Mr. Campbell, just before you answer that, Mr. Paisley, could you just give us the date of that email? It'd just be interesting to know where it was in the cycle from the 1st of Jan.
It was at 7:32, sent to me 7:32 2 days ago by my constituent from Ballymena.
Okay, thank you. Campbell?
Yes, I do. I think there will be increasing irritation right across the community. It'll certainly not just be in Unionist households. And I noted the questioning and debate in the House of Lords yesterday, where every Northern Ireland peer who spoke, including, for example, former SDLP leader, was questioning and expressing concern over the availability of cancer medicines in Northern Ireland, as opposed to the rest of the United Kingdom, where they're freely available. And there seems to be some doubt now that after the grace period ends, whether they will actually be available to cancer patients in Northern Ireland. That is a situation that just cannot be allowed to pertain. No other country in the world would tolerate suppliers having to issue customs declarations to move goods from one part of its own territory to the other. It certainly wouldn't be allowed in any European Union country. So why on earth would it ever be acceptable in the United Kingdom?
Lord Frost, the Prime Minister's key negotiator now in this, has said that the PM is ready to, I'm quoting him, rip up Brexit deal on Northern Ireland. And this is from the Mail on Sunday of last week. The EU, and he goes on to say, the EU must stop point scoring and work with us to protect the peace. Protests have been occurring and political stability is at risk. Do you welcome the thrust of those comments? And how do you think, well, it's easy to say rip it up, how do you think the government should deal with the problems in the protocol? Is it logical or probable or even able to rip it up? Or is there another method that they could do that would be acceptable, do you think, to rank and file loyalists?
Well, I think the starting point has to be the realization that however well-intentioned it may have been, that the Northern Ireland Protocol isn't acceptable to both communities here. Therefore, I suspect one of the solutions might be for Europe, the United Kingdom, and with the support of the Irish government, to collectively agree to trigger Article 16 and to pause the protocol completely and allow a period of dialogue to find a workable solution. Mr. Chairman, we were asked and are preparing a paper on our ideas for an alternative, which will go to the Secretary of State and Lord Frost later this week, and I will copy it to you for the committee.
Thank you. That would be appreciated. Yes.
But we do want to be genuinely seen as not just criticising and condemning, but offering alternatives. And it's interesting in Michel Barnier's book, which I haven't read yet, but I have seen qualified quotations from it, where he actually does say there was a third way, and that third way was customs checks at the mainland European points of entry, provided there was a solution agreeable to the Irish government for the island here. And it would appear that the Irish government, frankly, did not explore that option. Now, that surely must be the option that has to be explored. If we can find a solution, whether it's through goodwill or some form of derogation for trade within this island, then any goods and services moving forward to the rest of the European Union can have their checks on those European ports of entry like Calais or Rotterdam or wherever. So this idea that there's no alternative, no other solution, frankly doesn't hold water. I think there are solutions, and there is technology available now, which, let's face it, if we order anything from a bunch of flowers to a computer to be delivered to our home, you get a tracking number and you can track the delivery in real time, and even be given a date and time almost to the hour where it will arrive at your door. So this requires a bit of political goodwill and political common sense. And if we had had that, rather than, in our view, the European desire to punish Britain for voting to leave the European Union, and I suspect a mischievous Irish desire to reignite strident nationalism on this island, we wouldn't be in the position we're in today. And
very, very finally, Mr. Calman, I know I'm going to ask you to keep this brief, and I'm sorry about that, but I know other colleagues want to get in. But very finally, do you believe there's anything good in the protocol for business and practical ways?
Well, we have said from the start there does have to be some form of protocol or agreement, because we are into a new dispensation and we are into new arrangements. But if there is any good in this current protocol, it is just so vastly outweighed by the constitutional hurt that it simply has to be replaced now. I don't think it can just be tinkered with.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell,